All right, people, we've got actually a surprise for you today. We have back-to-back Lost episodes. Luke is unfortunately unable to go live with us next Sunday, so we're just going to hit them both out of the way today. So we are starting off today with Season 2, Episode 17, I believe we are on, Lockdown. Yep. We are starting to get fast and furious, if you will. You know, like I said, in this episode, we have a solo Locke and Ben episode, and then the next one, Dave, we are finally getting closer. This is a big episode in the sense of we finally get the truth of Henry Gale revealed, because as we saw at the end of the last one, right, with the last episode left off on that massive cliffhanger of Ana Lucia, Sayid, and Charlie in the field looking for Henry Gale's balloon. And meanwhile, down in the hatch, he makes a very veiled but not so veiled threat to Jack and Locke. And so we're picking up right from that. Luke, anything to say before we jump into this episode?
I will say two very... The two different ends of what a Lost episode is. You get the one where you have all the questions, and then the one where it's just everything's just going crazy. Like, you don't know what to believe. And then,
yeah.
And I didn't like watching two back to back. I like digesting it over the week and then preparing for it. So
yeah, exactly.
So it's definitely the right decision that we're doing one a week. But sometimes we gotta.
Yeah, sometimes things need to be made for the purposes of time, and so that we can hit the quota, as we say. But yeah, this was as you're right. As I'm doing it, I'm already struggling. I'm like, okay, was this episode? Was this like, I remember the broad strokes from each episode, but like micro specific moments that I know that we love to narrow in on. I'm like, oh, those get lost in the shuffle when we do 2 a week, but it's fine.
Now this week you did the Lost pun.
Yes. This week it was me. See, it's gonna keep happening. It's gonna. The island may not have invaded my dreams, but what's it called? Fuck it. Let's just get started. All that more in today's episode of Talkin' Lost. Okay, and just to be sure, just so that I know that we're on the same page, is this the episode that ends that leaves us with all the questions, or is it the next episode, Dave, that you're referring to, that leaves us with all that leaves us ending with the questions?
I think it's both.
Okay, I was about to say, because I'm like, they both kind of leave you with a lot of questions, but I mean, I don't know. So I'll say this: one of the ends of these episodes, I know, like that's one of those things where it's like, oh, I remember this because I remember this from when I watched it the first time. The end of the next episode, Dave, is one that I'm like, oh yeah, I had to remind myself of. I'm like, oh yeah, that's where there was a connection there. So, but we'll say that for the next episode. This is Lockdown, which is our next Locke-focused episode. It's literally in the title. Basically, you have once again something that Lost specializes in, which is daddy issues. Because as we know, how many characters are we at now that have daddy issues? I'm counting like minimum 4. It's Jack, Locke, Sawyer, and Kate. So that's
I throw Jin in there.
Yeah, or son/Jin. Yeah, since they're always lumped together, those two. Yeah, I would say that they're both there, and then the rest of the time it's just Hurley and Charlie hallucinating about things and getting fucked with by the island. So I would say that that's about our even ratio right now. So I think that like this is another episode where we kind of like a fun filler side plot, since the impetus that they have in order to keep the rest of the characters away from the hatch, because this is an episode that's dependent on only Locke and Ben. Henry Gale, sorry, as we still know him as, being locked together in the hatch while the rest of the characters are off on their own. So basically, if I'm not mistaken, again, I really hate watching 2 episodes back to back because it makes me forget shit. What was the reason why Jack was not in the hatch and why it was just Locke in bed? Like, Jack just went to like tell everybody basically about Henry Gale being in the hatch. That's what it was.
Okay, so I think Jack. First, Claire, because I quickly recapped them right before this. So Claire, Aaron had a fever or something again, and then I think Libby had something that she needed Jack for, and Jack was like, "Hey, we don't have any medicine." It's like, "Hey, Sawyer's over there playing poker with Hurley and Kate."
And that's what leads to the poker game that takes up the whole
myself
episode.
for the whole episode playing poker to get the medicine.
This is good. This is why I need you. Yeah. So basically just have them playing poker for an entire episode, and that's like the fun beach side plot.
And as always in every single movie or show with poker, the villain has really good cards and the hero has even better cards.
Yes. And or bluffs or figures out the villain's tell and bluffs them into insanity. What's it called? So that's basically the subplot. But the majority of the focus of this episode is basically Locke and Henry Gale trapped together in the hatch, basically, when this weird lockdown procedure happens out of nowhere, and a bunch of blast doors go down and trap Locke in the main kitchen area, so he's unable to get to the computer in order to prevent the countdown, and he's forced to rely on Ben in order to, sorry, I keep saying, spoil the name, Henry Gale, as he's still referred to, in order to climb through the vents and basically shut down the computer. And so basically what you have is that's basically established by this episode. That's the other problem too, that what's interesting about doing these two episodes back to back is the fact that there's a lot of stuff that is also being unresolved in this episode that will then be resolved in the next episode, basically, where the big takeaway from this episode is this is Locke and Ben start to be on the same page, you know, like, even though for the majority of this season they are still on, you know, their opposite sides. Locke is obviously with the beach survivors, and Ben is obviously, as you know, with the others. But this is where, but I'll say that, like, there's a point throughout this show where these two start to see some sort of common ground, because what you realize is, much less so than Jack and Locke are diametrically opposed. These two, Locke and Ben, are opposite sides of the same coin, where they're both characters that are looking for purpose in their life, as is, you know, underlined as well by Locke's flashbacks in this episode. But they're characters that ultimately have different flaws and needs and go about it in a different way. Because at the end of the day, while they are both characters that are stricken by hubris, Locke is ultimately one that is always going to put himself aside at the end of the day for the greater good. Whereas Ben is always going to try and kind of fulfill his selfish desires here. But this is the episode where, again, like, so the blast doors go down. Locke is forced to free Henry Gale. And is basically like, look, we gotta figure out a way out of here. They managed to lift up the blast doors.
It's a bit of a bottle episode.
A little bit, yes.
I like.
Managed to lift up the blast doors just a little bit, but unfortunately, Locke's leg gets trapped underneath. So there's that. I'm like, well, so much for that island magic healing your legs.
Like, the island needed him to stay there. It's like, no. You need to see what's written on the door in a little bit. So
the island giveth, and the island taketh away, as we always say. But when his leg becomes trapped on the door, he manages to convince Ben to climb up through the vents, get to the computer, tells him to punch in the code. Then all of a sudden he assumes that Ben does it because the blast doors go up. But
No. First the UV light comes
right,
on.
Right. But then first But while he's waiting, he hears the massive alarm that signals, oh no, they've counted down to 0, and then you get those weird icons with the red with the hieroglyphics on it, and then the UV light comes on and it illuminates this massive picture on the hatch with all of the different with all the different drawings all surrounding the big question mark. So my question is now, since we got a big lost lore drop in this episode, we actually got a couple of lore drops in between these two episodes, but what were your thoughts on this lore drop right here?
I think it's a classic, like, a lost element of, hey, we're going to throw this brand new thing at you. And, like, we're not really going to tell you anything about it. You're just going to get a quick peek at it, and then it's going to be important later on, I'm sure. And there's nothing better than a big question mark. It's just like really literally obvious, like, hey, what is this mystery? Yeah. Obviously, I had to go back and pause it, and zoom in on everything I could.
I would expect nothing less.
It's mostly just vague bullshit, like magnetic disturbance, blah blah blah. CV1, CV2, CV3. So that's all the surrounding hatches. There was the swan, the flame, the staff, the something else, the arrow. I think most importantly, there was "You are here." So, and pointed to where the swan is, which is their hatch.
Yes. So now So now we know the name of their hatch, the swan. Yeah. And given that they are in a Dharma bunker, you can assume then that the rest of those are all the other Dharma bunkers that have been placed around the island. And then
there are these tunnels leading, like, weaving through and out. But most importantly, there's one central one where the big question mark is, and I'm sure that will be the focus of seasons.
Well, not to be too obvious, but there is an episode coming later on in the season that is called question marks. So, but one can assume that
maybe they get there earlier than I think.
Yeah, we shall see. Like I said, we are getting very close to the end game, and I forgot how much season 2, the second half, throws at you, because they spend so much time setting you up with the tail end survivors that the second half of the show is when they throw in all the lost lore. See, I remember back in the days of season 1 when they were just trying to undercover and figure out what that stupid bunker was, and now it's like you have all of this nonsense that's getting thrown out. This is definitely the point of the show where you can tell, I think Damon Lindelof realized, he's like, oh, this is the shit that not only are the fans going to clamor onto, or all these little Easter eggs that get placed throughout every time you throw it, but the networks are going to go nuts. So I think that what happened was, I think that he ended up like playing a game of, it's like, okay, we're just going to kind of pull a little bit of a George Lucas. We're just going to throw shit in there, or classic J.J. Abrams. He's like, we're just going to throw shit in there. We don't even know what it's going to be, but the fans are going to go nuts over it. And then we'll kind of figure it out as we go along.
That's a job for future us.
Exactly. We don't got to worry about that yet.
That's kind of what the Breaking Bad writers did in season 5, right? They shot the thing with Walt and the minigun in the back. Yes. And said, okay, we'll figure out
how to get there. And again, it's a classic TV writing mechanism. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I'll say that with Lost, they do eventually work it out. It's like they for the most part, they do tell you what everything is, but it's just a matter of like, it's kind of more so like done in the background and like ambiguously, so you may not exactly like get, again, once again, going back to, this is why Lost is a binge show made in the network era, because they're not explicitly telling you what everything is, but they are dropping it in there, and they are like setting stuff up like for the future and stuff. It's just a matter of, again, you got to be paying close attention to it. But
I like to imagine that like the whole writing team in the first season, like you said, they were trying to make like a Survivor type thing, like Lord of the Flies, and now they realized, oh, we're making like a sci-fi conspiracy show. Whoops, we gotta do this now.
Shit. Cause it looks like we gotta lean into this now, even though they had no desire of like going full genre. You know, like there's always sprinkling, like Lindelof, you can tell like sprinklings of genre, but like what the going the full drama, that's when it's like, oh man, we kind of trapped ourselves, didn't we? And that's exactly what happened. Like I said, it's not bad, but like knowing and understanding what it is definitely like kind of a crucial part of this show, and understanding why the finale had the reaction that it did. But then we get into Locke's flashbacks, which again, so we have another episode showing how, so we had the last couple flashbacks that have been building off of. What I like too also about the flashbacks is that they're not giving it to us in chronological order. What I liked is that the season 1 flashbacks were all like the most crucial moments that like set the characters on the destination in order to how they would end up on the island, right? Those were all the season 1 flashbacks. But season 2 is has been giving us like more pieces to help fill in some more of the context, you know? How Jack met his wife, you know, how Locke tried to move on. Because the thing is, the 2 season 1 Locke flashbacks were Locke right before he gets in the plane, when he's trying to go on the walkabout, or sorry, in Australia, right while he's trying to go on the walkabout, and then Locke meeting his dad, which were kind of like the 2 crucial beginning and end points of Locke's journey towards the island. And now we're kind of getting in the filler. So the first one we got this season was how we met his longtime girlfriend, played by Sons of Anarchy's Katie Seagal. And this episode, we see his father, Anthony Cooper, come back into his life when he first, at the beginning of the episode, discovers that his father is dead. Case in point, whenever a con man is dead, they're not actually dead. They're just faking their death in order to ward off someone. Locke is very easily able to figure it out when him and Katie Seagal are the only ones at the funeral. He sees on what it looks to one side, there's the classic 2 very very mid-2000s mafia-looking guys standing right there that look like extras pulled right out of The Sopranos, or guys who wanted to be on The Sopranos that were pulled right out. And then on the other side, he sees a mysterious car with the windows up. What could this possibly mean? Next thing you know, he ends up running into Anthony Cooper, who tells him that he needs him to pull $7 million that he had from a job that he conned from these guys and bring it to him so that he can run. And then along the way, Katie Seagal is also able to quickly figure out that Anthony Cooper is also still alive. She confronts John about it. John lies to her, says, no, I don't think he's alive. And this is after the 2 Sopranos wannabes show up at their place in order to try and get the money and get the location. John holds firm, but then John goes, meets up with his dad, gives him the money, and then is confronted by Katie Seagal, who follows him to the motel. What did you think of this scene, of these flashbacks? Because I have issues with them.
I will say they weren't my favorite flashbacks. I'm like, okay, what does this telling us about him on the island now? And I didn't really get that. So I was hoping that you would have a little more insight this time around.
So
I think when the island plot is like getting really interesting, it's like, oh, not another flashback.
Yeah.
Like in the next one, it's like quite crucial, but in this one was.
Yeah, it's ironic because I believe we only get the one Charlie flashback this season with the fire and water, which gave us context with his brother, right? And this is kind of similar in the sense of where season 2 so far has been taking traditionally really likable characters from season 1, like Locke and Charlie, and really testing them and putting them to their limits and showing them to be a little bit more unlikable, a little bit more harsh. And what I'll say about this flashback is this is the flashback that, in the same way that Jack is shown to be kind of a little bit too addicted to his work, which is why ultimately his wife is shown to have ended up leaving him. In the same way, they're kind of trying to do the same for Locke, where they're trying to show us like kind of Locke's fatal flaw at the end of the day, which is where like kind of his father taking something left a hole in him that just, he always had that hole that needed to be filled that he thought was, and then it turned out that his dad was just conning him out of his kidney. But in this instance, it's showing that like, oh, Locke's need for love and validation is going to be a constant source of trouble for him going forward, ultimately. And I get, if I had to venture to guess what they're trying to get at, that's what it is. Because in the sense of, Locke is shown to have basically become devoted to protecting the island in some way. Whatever, no matter whether it makes sense or what, he is like basically an island devotee. Something had to tell me that even if the rest of the survivors were rescued, Locke would ultimately not go back. He would choose to stay on the island, right? So, with that being said, this is one of those things where, that love, that devotation, it started to turn him into a little bit of a religious fanatic in the sense of he's putting everything else secondary and is choosing that. I mean, again, it's very ham-fisted when you have Katie Seagal, who, again, is the queen of stating the obvious. Again, just watch any Sons of Anarchy episode. That show is the most pulp that you could ever get. And you basically, but when she says, oh, you're choosing his love over mine, basically, so that instead of like, again, also another common theme of anything Damon Lindelof, letting go of your trauma and moving past it, and Lindelof shows every single character that Lindelof has ever written for anything is unable to move past their trauma ultimately. And that is the central source of conflict throughout all of his shows. Again, across his 3 big shows, Lost, Leftovers, and Watchmen, that's the constant source of tension with any of his characters. And so if I had to guess what they're venturing to go for, that's what it is, in the sense of where Locke's inability to let go of his dad ultimately screwing him over and ruining his life is going to be what prevents him from being able to move on ultimately. And now he's simply found a way to replace that, need for validation with the island, essentially. And now it has literally trapped him under a door and removed his ability to move as well.
Yeah, any kind of finds like another, potentially he will find someone like that in Ben, like, and they have the shared interest and respect for the island and whatnot. But we have to learn more about the actual Ben in that case, which
yes,
he's still putting on a bit of a charade.
He is still putting on a little bit of a charade indeed. And that brings us again to the major, to the last major plot line, you could say. So again, like I said, these last couple of episodes have been all tying together really nicely in a way that I wasn't expecting, where instead of like kind of resolving the plot, now we're getting to the point in the show where, again, we've been watching it long enough. They trust their audience enough so they can trust that their audience, that they could like leave certain plot lines off in one episode and then like continue it on in the next episode, where again, we had the cliffhanger at the end of last episode. Ana Lucia, Charlie, and Sayid getting to the empty field, us assuming that Bet and oh my God, Henry Gale's very ominous, cryptic warning / threat to Jack and Locke. They get to, so they start searching the field. You're immediately worried. You're like, oh no, are they gonna get ambushed? What's going on here? And instead, what do? They find the parachute and they find the grave.
Yeah, it's like they were telling us the whole time that there's parachute, there's
exactly
a balloon.
Where, but again, these guys have been on this island too long. They have been on this island too long. Their bullshit senses are too attuned. They're like, something is not right. And then you have the little Dharma package drop as well when Jack is going into the jungle after back to the hatch after Kate comes to ask him, comes to congratulate him on beating Sawyer at poker. And then they come across the big Dharma drop, all of, the massive Dharma packages, which are there conveniently right around the time when the blast doors went up after Ben entered the code. And then you have them run across Ana Lucia, Sayid, and Charlie. They all head back to the hatch. Sayid, they find Ben taking care of Locke, who's now once again, seriously injured because of the blast door crushing his leg and impaling him. They threaten him, and basically Sayid realizes, he's like, look, everything was exactly where you said, but it all still felt a little too convenient. So I dug up that grave, and what do you know? Who did I find? Not a woman, but a man, and he shows the ID of Henry Gale on it. So that basically confirms that everything that Henry Gale has been saying to them has been absolute bullshit up until this point. So now, like I said, we can dispense with the Henry Gale bullshit. We can call him by his real name, which is Ben Linus. I said at the moment that he was introduced. And boom, hard cut to credits. But real quick, so do you want to talk about the Dharma drop in this episode or next episode?
We can tackle it now because it's like just at the beginning of the next episode.
So,
I will say another thing, like Locke has not mentioned the map to anyone yet, much like he did in season 1 when he and Boone found the hatch. That he did not mention it. So
yes, again, and what I like about that too also is that Locke in the last season he was trying to be like, oh, like the island wants us to uncover this, but it also the others might not be ready for it. He's basically like dropping all these cryptic hints and warnings. But now that we have a little bit more insight into him, now we realize it's like, oh no, you just want to keep this precious thing for yourself so you can be special. Now we are made very well aware of what that is. So, and as for the Dharma drop, so this is going to be a little tricky and confusing, and I am going to spoil it now only because this is literally the only thing where that the show didn't directly answer. What happened is there was a bunch of DVD extras that were released along with the final season and along with every season, basically where they would have like I said, it was part of what made the show as big and as impactful as it was. The fact that, they would literally be dropping these things for fans to literally interact with the show, like these interactive games, the online chat boards, and everything would basically have like little like hints and Easter eggs that could potentially lead to a clue in the show. Like it was a totally different time and era, but one where truly, the monoculture was at its height. Ultimately with Lost. And what happened is that there were a couple of DVD extras that ended up being deleted scenes that were meant to be in the show but did not. And basically what's revealed is that even though the Dharma Initiative has not been active since the 70s. I don't remember if Dr. Chow, the guy who you saw in the Dharma intro video that they played at the beginning of the hatch, if he mentioned the incident yet or if he hasn't mentioned that yet. But basically what happened was that the Dharma Initiative, like I mentioned in the first, second, or third, whatever episode it was this season, was a scientific endeavor that was created and sent to study the island, essentially. And they were at their height during the 70s, which predates when Russo got there. But the whole thing is Dharma, for the most part, disbanded after the incident. I won't say what that is because that's literally we're going to find out what that is in a couple seasons from now. But they disbanded primarily after the incident. They were only sparsely left there. But like I said, you have the map now, so now you know all the different Dharma stations around. But the station that they're at, the hatch, was referred to as the Swan. And basically what happened is that despite the fact that Dharma had been disbanded since the 70s, they had basically, for lack of a better word, a way of sending packages to the island, essentially, still through gaps in space-time continuum that they had figured out, essentially. And one of the deleted scenes that was released post the final season that like kind of helps resolve one of the kind of loose, it's literally one of the only loose overhanging threads, was that Ben Linus goes to the guys on the mainland who are still sending packages every year, despite the fact that Dharma has been disbanded, basically tells him, hey, you don't have to do this anymore. And that's a deleted scene that you can just like watch. It's on YouTube. So, but that was dropped with the final season.
I dare not search YouTube because it'll start throwing the final season clips at me.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. But, yeah, it's just a fun little Easter egg tidbit, essentially. So, yeah, that's what's it called? So yeah, so that's really it. Ultimately, so like I said, it's not like a major spoiler, but it's
not huge.
But it's the only thing that's not resolved in the show. So if people are wondering, oh, where are the Dharma massive packages still coming from? That's what it is. Ultimately, so like I said, we end on a big cliffhanger. It's pretty freaking huge, but like I said, it's setting us up for a big episode in the next way with Dave in the next bit. So tune in for the following bit. The only thing that I'll say at the end of this episode is I did watch Materialists, the new Celine Song movie with Dakota Johnson, Pedro Pascal, and Chris Evans. There were some interesting bits in it, but it mostly horrified me in the sense of exposing, just how awful dating is in New York City in general, and just how, algorithmically based it's become. And so I thought that it was all right. I thought Chris Evans was really good in it. Pedro Pascal is continuing to prove why he is the most boring leading man in anything, and he's just like bland and cookie cutter. And Dakota Johnson is doing less and less of a good job to convince me that she's not a robot. So that's really the biggest takeaway that I can say without like really dissecting this movie and throwing out all my flaws. So I don't want to ruin it for everybody who has seen it, who likes it for now, until the discourse sets in. But I also, I don't know. I'm not a rom-com fan in general. So it's not, so this movie already had an uphill battle appealing to me in general. And then I saw it and I just had so many problems with it. So you'll have to let me know what you think of it. When you watch it once it comes to you in August, because Past Lives was a movie that I enjoyed. I enjoyed a lot more than this, and I did enjoy in general. I also thought that it was a tad bit overrated. I'm like, this is solid. This is really, really, really good. I don't know if it's gonna hold up as well in like 5 or 10 years, but we'll have to see about that. So, like I said, we're going to be right back in about 5-10 minutes with with Dave. So stay tuned for that. So we'll wait until the end of that episode to do plugs. In the meantime, see you in like 5 minutes. Get lost.